How do personal stories about the world affect how we relate to others?
Well, I think primarily our stories about the world affect how we interpret other people's stories about the world. So, I mean, from the get-go, if you're a conscious being, you open your eyes and a world is presented to you. And then you try to navigate that world by addressing two things. One, what's happening? And two, what am I going to do about it? And what's happening is the result of diagnosis. You look around at reality and you try to decide what is happening. Now, what does that even mean to say what is happening? Well, I need to phrase this giant flux of activity in some sort of narrative or coherent story-like structure such that I can rely on this to navigate that. Because if everything is brand new and unique at every second, learning is impossible. So I have to start to notice patterns. I have to start to notice causes and effects. And then I start to use language to identify these things. And then I construct a story about what's happening. And then secondly, once I have that, I can construct a story about what I'm going to do about it, which is generally speaking how I'm going to assert through my behavior the accomplishment of my values. So one of them is, what's the landscape? And two is, what are my values in this landscape? But your question was, how do we affect other people by our own stories? I fear that there's a difficulty because we're not just autonomous, independent selves generating stories. What we're doing is interacting with other people that have stories. And the primary effect we seem to have on other people is either one of sameness or one of difference. So you and I can connect, that's so true, yeah, I connect on that, that's so true, yeah, and we're the same, so we share a story, and that makes us feel like we're sharing each other as selves. Or we have different stories, and that feels like we're not sharing ourselves as selves. Or you have a different story, and I have a different story, but there's a self below those stories. It's like, yeah, that's never happened to me. I can really appreciate your difference. You're different than me. But there has to be some undergirding, underlying story that makes us same, or there's not the ability to appreciate. Because appreciation is about, as I see it, recognizing something that has value to both of us. And for something of value to both of us, it has to be part of our story of value. So I think one of the main problems that we find lately, I don't remember it being this difficult, and maybe I'm just looking at forms of media where exacerbating conflict is titillating and it draws your attention to these things. But basically the concept of attention is at hand here. What do we pay attention to? And most of us pay attention to our own stories, and even when someone else tells us a story, we kind of filter their story through our story machine, and it becomes our story. You know how when you see like these movies where something's black and white, and then all of a sudden something changes and it becomes color, and the whole world changes and it becomes colored? That's kind of what we do. Like we have a color version of a story, and someone else has a black and white version. We take their story and we colorize it for our story, but when we do that, it's not really the same story. So to say, yeah, I hear your story, most of the time, we're only hearing what their story sounds like or looks like once it's refracted through the values of our story. Meaning that somebody that doesn't agree with you about values in the world, you think this person is an evil person. A person is evil. They have values that I have the opposite values. But that person doesn't wake up in the morning and think those aren't values to them. They're not like, yeah, you're right, I'm evil. They look in the mirror and think that they're a good person doing the good. They're opening their eyes and a world has been brought to them. And they're making decisions based on what they think is happening, and they're explaining it with stories and what they're going to do about it. The values they are going to impose on this terrain of the happenings. Yeah. And to really understand or communicate, I think I need to try to more deeply understand what somebody else's story is. It's becoming more pronounced to me that almost every disagreement that people have would go away if they realized they were talking about different things. They think they're talking about the same thing and they're not. Yeah, so that's how I see stories affecting people. Does that make sense?
So would you say that we trust someone with a similar story and distrust or hate people with an opposing or different story?
It seems to be the tendency.
And then how does back on what you said a second ago about they don't wake up in the morning and think they're the villain. They think they're the hero.
They think they're the hero, and then you take that hero of their story and you phrase it in terms that it fits the villain of your story. So you're each like redressing the other person's values as things you don't value. I mean, there might be some fundamental disagreement. Somebody fundamentally might not agree on whether or not, on what freedom means, or what liberty means, or what free speech means. There might be fundamental differences. But it seems like it's almost an insurmountable difficulty that it's very easy to not be really seeing what somebody else is saying. In order to understand what they value, you have to understand a lot of the aspects of their story. And then once you see why they value that, you're not going to take something somebody values in a story and say, no, you're wrong, don't value that, and then give an argument. What you're going to do is try to address the conditions in their story that give that thing value and say, oh, do you see those conditions? I think you're phrasing it slightly off. That's not actually how the world is. Or if you follow that trail, it goes somewhere else. Like you want to address the circumstances that imbue the thing with value. Because the only way to change anyone's mind is to start with agreement. Like if you're talking to somebody, and the most fundamental form of agreement is trust. It's the most basic form of agreement. And maybe trust or goodwill. But if somebody doesn't have goodwill in a conversation, there's very little that can happen if the rules aren't super regimented. Obviously in our court system, in the rule of law, in our legal system, legal fictions, we have a whole series of stories about which behaviors are prohibited and which behaviors aren't, and what the punishments are, and the means by which we go to decide who transgressed. This is all like the law. There's no goodwill between a prosecutor and a defense. They will do whatever they can to win the case. But they're still able to communicate and hopefully, more often than not, get to the truth because the system was so deliberately decided upon that it curbs or it holds in check every conflict of interest you might have. Like, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just keep evidence that they don't have to myself. Well, you can't do that because of discovery. So we recognize with the most cynical view of what human beings are like, let's just assume that human beings are shitty and will lie. How can we set up a system that will still accomplish the truth more often than not, given that we're all going to try to lie? And, it doesn't work because you can't create a system that's so specific that it doesn't allow someone to be an asshole. Because when you do, a system that doesn't allow someone to be an asshole also doesn't allow them to be a little bit different or creative. So you really only get two choices. A system, a structure that's so sophisticated and intrusive that it determines every aspect of your life, and that's intolerable, or one that tries to make separations. And in our country, this is why we don't have a theocracy. We have what we call rule of law. So like, dude, your beliefs about stuff, your personal stories, those are less important than this fundamental story we all agree upon. And our fundamental story is based on the idea of private property and ownership. And that's a story that's not debatable. It would be unthinkable for most Americans to have a story where you had to worship a certain God and you had to exhibit certain virtues like faithfulness and honesty. It's not illegal to be dishonest, except in very specific conditions. So we've made a separation that allows us to live a life that's basically like this. Okay, as long as you don't break the law, and then the morality part is, and don't hurt anybody, you can do whatever the fuck you want behind closed doors.
But it seems like nowadays people are fighting for the right to be heard, the right to be respected, the right to have their belief systems broadcast to the world and mandated some form of respect.
I don't know, maybe. I'll just have to take each case as it comes up. I'm not sure what people in general are doing. You know what I mean? I'm not sure in general.
Let's talk about like abortion.
Okay.
There's one side, people believe that the female body belongs to the female body and she should have every right to do what she wants to an unborn child or fetus. And then the other side is you're killing them and they're fighting over that.
Okay. Well, and so ostensibly those are different values.
They believe, one side believes that you're killing a life and the other one doesn't believe that it's a life.
Okay, yeah. And?
So we're fighting over the belief that I have versus the belief that you have. And I don't know how to resolve these issues, but maybe you do.
No, I don't know how to resolve almost anything. I just know that, like, ideologies in general serve the person who holds those ideologies. They serve them up a belief that that person is acting in accord with how one should act. You know what I mean? When we go back to what's happening in the world and what am I going to do about it, what we're going to do about it is generally where we disagree about value. What I'm going to do about it is I think I should be able to have an abortion if I were a female. And somebody else is like, well, what I'm going to do about it is I don't think you should be able to have an abortion. That's what I'm going to do about it. But the reason we differ on what I'm going to do about it is because we differ about what we say is happening. You say what's happening, if you're pro-life, that I'm murdering. The person who's pro-choice says, no, what's happening is I'm honoring the freedom and liberty of my own body to make a decision that may be not super desirable, but it's certainly not murder. It's actually none of your business what I do. So they have a different premise about what's actually happening. So if you have a different premise about what's happening, and that's where your story is first constructed, you're obviously going to have a different premise about what you should do about it, how you should act in the world. So, if we think, hey, can I walk from here to Russia? Well, it depends. Is that the Bering Strait? Is it frozen over? If it's frozen over, you can walk across it. If it's not, you can't. So what's really happening affects what I should do about it. So we need to figure out what's really happening. And it's very difficult to figure out what's happening. I'll just cite an example because we characterize people that disagree with us. It's a standard straw man argument, generally. We make some sort of straw man argument version of such that we say they think this is really happening, and that's fucking absurd. We know that's not really happening. And it can be said on both sides. Like, any woman that's going to Planned Parenthood, if people are holding up signs that says, baby killer, I've known a lot of women who have done this, and none of them think they're baby killers. They're not celebrating the fact that they're terminating a life force that possesses the possibility of beauty. There's some difficulty in the decision. But none of them are actually thinking what's happening is they're killing babies. That's not their story. And then on the other side, we can look at a contemporary version of immigration policy. Most of the people that are probably pro-Planned Parenthood probably have more liberal immigration policies and border policies than conservatives. And so these people would probably say something like, when they characterized liberal immigration and ICE and whatever, you're putting babies in cages. You're putting babies in cages. No guy that works for ICE, probably, or person that lives there, actually thinks they're putting baby in cages any more than the woman thinks she's killing a baby. You're just characterizing what somebody else is doing because then it makes their choice about how to assert their value despicable. If they really were like, let's just round up kids and put them in cages, they would be despicable. Yeah. If people were really like, let's kill babies, they really would be despicable. But that's not fair to either side. You know what I mean? And so what are the contexts or what are the surrounding stories about what's happening in the world that result in people having a secondary story, which is how am I going to act in the world? So it doesn't make it any easier that we mischaracterize other people's views because we find their story wrong. We find what they value wrong, Therefore, we find them as individuals despicable. Oh, only a despicable person would hold this story.
Yeah.
It's possible that a non-despicable person would believe that this is what was happening in the world, and if you were believed that was happening in the world, it might not be that despicable to believe this is the way to act in the world. So if you really want to change two views on how should we act in the world, you've got to come to some consensus on what you think is really happening in the world. And characterizing the worst possible version of what's happening is bringing in value and story into the area that should probably be just language that's more objective. But again, it gets difficult, because what's the difference between physics and religion? Like, one of them is a language that describes reality without recourse to personality, and the other one is a language that describes reality with almost pure recourse to personality. You know, the personality of God, whatever. The difference is they treat stories differently, and they treat the concept of change or adaptation or adaptability differently. There's nothing you can tell a Christian if you said, dude, is there anything that could happen in the universe that you can imagine, the limits of your imagination, that would occur, that you would witness, such that you would no longer believe in your story? They would say, no, there's nothing.
No.
If you asked a scientist, is there anything you would believe that could happen that would make you no longer believe in string theory? They'd be like, of course, 1,000 things. We just don't know what they are. So these are different mechanisms of developing stories. One of the mechanisms is really interested in actuality because it cares about the truth. The other one is really interested in something probably different than actuality, because it doesn't seem like its instincts are always to go to the truth. One of the reasons, or one of the ways it seems that I am more trusting of a human being, is if they're more willing to separate themselves from their story with new information. And that's the difference between science and religion. Religion is a constant story regardless of how reality changes. Science is a constantly changing story based entirely on what reality does and how we measure it.
So an individual with a belief system that is unchangeable, unadaptable, is kind of perhaps limiting the ability for people in general to come to agreements or understandings or compromises.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that makes it even more difficult is what mechanisms or behaviors do we have access to that might be helpful in resolving disagreement? That's, clearly an important part of any society. Do you have a mechanism for the redress of grievances?
Yeah.
Science does. Religion doesn't. So, I forgot.
The redress of grievances, maybe like resentment.
Yeah, I mean, what were you saying right? I forgot what you were saying. I don't know why I said redress of grievances. Somehow, a mechanism that allows you to resolve conflict. That's what we're looking for. And one of the mechanisms of resolving conflict is compromise. And it seems today that there exists an unwillingness by more people to compromise, because compromise is seen differently by young people, in my experience at least.
Yeah.
Most older people consider compromise to be a wise solution to make everybody, to resolve conflict. Whereas it seems that often compromise, at least contemporarily, maybe it's not young people, it's seen as a weakness. Only those people who have fragile convictions and principles compromise. To compromise is to reveal that you really don't truly believe what you're saying that much. You're really not that principled. And that's a negative thing. Nobody wants to be that. So there's a mechanism to redress conflict. How do we address conflict? Well, we could compromise. Not in a situation where compromise suggests that you don't really have principles. And in a world where your moral purity is determined by how inflexible you are about the story you have of the world, it's going to be almost impossible to compromise.
Yeah.
Because the mere act of compromising would be to lose moral purity. And so, like, I have no idea what moral purity is. Like, I'm a golden rule guy. But generally speaking, this system, we have a story and a person holding the story. And then I'm a person and I have my story. One of the, as the guy who wrote *Sapiens* says, one of the ways that we can cooperate in large amounts of people, is by having the same story. So if I have a story about law and behavior in the world, and I go 3,000 miles away to Boston, somebody else has the same story, I can interact with a total stranger. Whereas if this is 15,000 years ago and we're roaming around sort of pre-agricultural revolution, hunter-gatherer, and we're 125 people and you're 130 people, we meet each other, we don't have the same story. So all interaction with strangers is exacerbated conflict. In fact, I think Donald Black almost argues in his book, The Theory of Law, or maybe more recently, Moral Time, that the law is merely a mechanism or a story created to help us resolve conflict between strangers. If I think something, if I bump into your car, let's say me and you are out at the park, and we back into each other and our cars collide, we're almost for sure going to figure that out on our own.
Yeah.
There's no, and if somebody decides to not figure it out on their own, in a way that reveals the personal nature of that friendship. They're like, no, I'm calling insurance, it's over. They're like, okay, they've decided to strangerize you because they believe their self-interest will be better served by strangerizing you and having the law resolve the situation than by just figuring it out as two people who have goodwill and trust.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
I would like to touch back on something you said earlier about fiction and nonfiction. I think you remember.
Oh, yeah. I was watching, I wish I could remember his name, Yuval, the guy that wrote *Sapiens*, and he was being interviewed by, I forgot her name, Black Swan chick? Natalie Portman. And she was asking him about, we have stories, but some stories we're aware we're aware that they're fictional, and other stories we're not aware they're fictional. Because he was talking about how you can communicate with people from different countries, like, oh my God, you watched that TV show, I watched that TV show. Now that's a little different than, oh my God, you believe in human rights, I believe in human rights. Yeah. Or, oh my God, you believe that you shouldn't chew with your mouth open, I believe you shouldn't chew with your mouth open. Those are a little different. So she made the distinction between sharing a story that you both recognize as fictional or not. And he kind of blurred the line and said it's really not that clear. Because even when you're watching a piece of fiction, you suspend disbelief. We all learned this in high school. Those of you who went to high school. I didn't, because I was too busy doing crime and punk rock.
Cool.
But yeah, super cool, because that was my story.
Yeah.
We all remember the phrase willing suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
And it just struck me. It had a symmetry to it. I thought of this other phrase. I'm like, oh yeah, cool. So when we want to truly appreciate fiction, we need to have a willing suspension of disbelief. By the same token, if we want to fully understand nonfiction, we should have a willing suspension of our own belief.
Yes.
And I find it I kind of like the balance of that. So when you say something like, that's a cool saying, dude, I think it's valuable. So in fact, people that I trust more tend to be less convinced of their own infallibility. Meaning, if I talk to a person and I witness their ability to suspend their belief in their own story as they encounter a new story, I find that the person doing that story holder, that self, whatever that is more of a trustworthy thing. It has better will. It has goodwill. It seems honest. And by honest, I mean it seems less corrupted or diluted by the pressing conditions of the ego. I'll just bring up that phrase, pressing conditions. This phrase just hit me the other day. It's not a unique phrase, like pressing conditions, yeah, whatever. But it just struck me that, and again, I was watching this guy who wrote *Sapiens* talking about automated cars and self-driving cars, and he's like, oh, maybe you should study philosophy. Having education and how to interact with sophisticated and rigorous approaches to moral philosophy is going to be useful. And by useful, he meant monetizable, and therefore it fits into our society. Because eventually, if you have self-driving cars, they're going to have to make quasi-moral decisions. Like they have to distinguish between a deer and a baby, which is not a big decision. Everybody knows you would swerve and hit the deer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But then again, this gets weird. I don't know. We've all heard rumors since we were 5 years old that cows just roam India and they're sacred. You just got back from India.
Yeah.
If I had made that fucking swerve and hit the cow, might that be the wrong moral choice in that circumstance?
I'm not sure.
But you see how it gets
But
touchy.
I think the baby would always be my choice.
I know, but two things. One, we have to program this car's algorithm to make that decision. So it struck me that one of the reasons philosophers have been asking these questions for 2,500 years, at least Western philosophers, is that they didn't have to answer the question. They're like, yeah, I don't know, that's a good one. That's your standard sophomore smoking weed in your dorm. You're like, I don't know, dude, that's cool. Fuck, we got to go do this. I got to finish a paper. And like, you can just put it on hold. But with self-driving, you can no longer put it on hold. So you're required to have an answer.
Yeah.
And it struck me that, oh, that's a pressing condition. So pressing conditions alter the value we place on certain decisions and answers. Like some sort of answer under pressing conditions is better than no answer whatsoever. Some situations are such that if you don't do something, it will without doubt get worse. So something is probably better than nothing. Pressing conditions require action. So it struck me that there's some sort of link between pressing conditions and then that fundamental, what's happening in the world and what am I going to do about it? And pressing conditions sort of enhances the urgency with which these two questions need to be answered. And because they do need to be answered under increasing pressing conditions, we need to figure out a way to think about them that allows that to be answered. And that's what training is, generally. Most people that are trained, they're taught how to respond to pressing conditions that usually result in us panicking and abandoning rational behavior. Mm-hmm. Most of us in an airplane would just be freaking out if it were going down.
Yeah.
These people are so well trained. We've all heard the guy on the cockpit. He's like, yeah, this is flight 1075. We're coming in without two engines. I'm like, dude, you're talking like you're asking your buddy to order pizza or something. You're about to die. Why aren't you freaking out? Because they know that pressing conditions can sometimes alter quality decision making. Yeah. So I just wanted to introduce the notion of pressing conditions because in sort of unprecedented material wealth of the 21st century, albeit disparate, you know what I mean? Everyone has a different measurement tool. Like there are way less people now than have ever, or proportionally, in poverty than have ever existed in the world. And yet the poverty disparities are also the greatest disparities that ever existed in the world. And yet even a poor person like me who has no job and no money, I'm having a cigarette and coffee and in an air-controlled garage. You know what I'm saying? So it's all relative, perspective, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going into that area. That was a long answer.
Yeah, right. I think that back to your phrase, the suspension of our own beliefs for nonfiction. I think that that's really important because it seems like people today in conversations about things that value to them and oppose somebody else. So stories that are conflicting.
Can I say something really quickly? It just struck me. In addition, what we're basically, it seems like we're doing is we're checking off things that make communication and resolution of conflict more difficult. And here's another one. The inability to compromise because it's seen as weakness or unprincipled behavior. Yeah. That makes resolution of conflict difficult. Here's another thing that makes it difficult. If I don't trust you as a person, I'm going to be way less likely to trust your story. Mm-hmm. And in order for me to suspend my belief in my own story, it's a requirement for me to suspend belief in my own story to hear your story. Yeah. But why would I offer you that hearing of fairness if I thought you had bullshit motives or self? Then I'm like, okay, you can't be trusted as a self. So any story you're coming up with is just going to be self-serving. I don't care how logically you've constructed the story or how many lawyers you have working on it. I'm not even going to entertain it because I fundamentally distrust the whole project. Yeah. So we don't, and this works the other way. if I don't trust you, I'm not going to trust your story. And now I'm finding more people are like, if your story deviates from my story by 1 or 2%, I'm all of a sudden not going to trust you.
I'm villainizing you.
You're a villain because your story is 99% my story. Or I'm not even going to listen to your story because you're a villain. So the main difficulty there is this belief in villains and non-villains. And it's difficult because there do appear to be villains.
Which is fictionalizing versus non-fictionalizing.
Well, I don't know. Is there a scientific definition of villain?
Okay, villains can't exist in real life, but the story mechanism that we create in our heads where we're like, you're a villain, you killed the baby. That
Or you're a villain, you caged the baby. So, so maybe along lines of understanding, again, I want to break it back to what's happening and what are we going to do about it. We should give people more benefit of the doubt. But then the thing is, I can hear the argument, yeah, but there's a lot of disingenuous people with despicable ulterior motives. And to give them the benefit of the doubt is just going to give them a forum for their beautifully constructed bullshit manipulative propaganda so they can continue to promulgate the status quo because it serves them. I can see someone saying that. But here's the thing. Everyone's story has a villain and a good guy. So maybe we can start with the sameness there. Your story has a villain and a good guy? Yeah. You consider abortion the villain and the good guy to be family values. Okay? This person has a villain and a hero too. They believe that the villain is the oppression and disenfranchisement and subjugation of women. And one example of this is trying to control their bodies, what they think, whether they can work, whether they can vote. So this is just yet another example. So if you can see, can you see their villain more clearly? If you were them, would you be like, yeah, okay, I can see how they see that those are all villainous behaviors, and that would contribute to my wanting to be on the side that I have this right to do it.
Yeah. So to wrap it up, I would like to just talk about things that might help the situation.
What's the situation?
Understanding, communication, trust, letting go of our stories.
That's funny because that's the name of this new song. It's called Understanding, Communication, Trust, and Letting Go of Our Stories. And it goes a little something like this. I just wanted to recite everything you just said verbatim so you could see that I was listening.
Yeah.
I was just showing off.
Yeah. But like...
What were you saying?
Listening is one quality that would help. Like, it doesn't help that we don't listen.
Yeah, but
it doesn't help that we get emotional when we are triggered by something that doesn't relate to our story.
I want to check off one more thing that makes it more difficult. Consider this. If the main reason that a story becomes attractive to me is my emotional connection with it, then there's no way I'm letting go of that story. Because emotional connections to things feel more like ourselves than intellectual connections with things. I thought I was going to say more than I just said.
Yeah.
It just struck me that, like, we all agree that an emotional attachment to your story makes communication more difficult.
Yes.
But it seems like most of the stories I hear that people feel strongly about are all emotionally felt strongly about.
Yeah.
Like, if you intellectually feel strongly about some behavior that will do some good, cool. But to the degree to which you're emotionally attached to it, that's the degree to which you're going to find it probably or likely difficult to suspend. So, you know, I was thinking about this with relationships. The way you got into a relationship probably says a lot about how you're going to get out of it.
Okay.
I mean, meaning like if you got into it with sort of emotional naivete, where you like knew that you were describing the reality as it really wasn't happening, but you wanted to believe that. You blended those two things. What is happening and what am I going to do about it? What you did is you started with what I want to do about it, and then you reverse engineered and redetermined what you thought was really happening so you could get what you wanted. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you go into a relationship like that, it's likely that you're going to leave a relationship like that. Again, you're going to feel something, you're like, what do I want to feel? And then you're going to reverse engineer it, and you're going to redetermine what you thought was really happening. So if you go into a relationship like that, it's likely that you're going to leave a relationship like that. Again, you're going to feel something, you're like, what do I want to feel? What I want to feel is that I'm noble and that person was an asshole, that I'm honest and that person wasn't. And then so you're going to contort reality and have a history of the thing. And that's why most people that break up, they think that person, like, if those were scientists, oh, you don't want to date my ex, she's an asshole. Or you don't want to date my ex, he's an asshole. Or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
If that were the case and that was science, that person should be taken off the market. Oh, that's an asshole. Get him out of the market. No one ever has to date him again.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. This person doesn't think they're an asshole.
Right.
Have they changed?
Right.
No, this person doesn't know yet. Anyway, I'm saying, like, it's all so connected. The way we do anything is the way we do everything.
Yeah.
So if you're emotionally attached to a story, it's probably only if emotions got you the story, probably only emotions are going to get rid of the story. And that's why science is so amenable to alteration, because those stories were developed with primarily intellect and not emotion.
Right.
Therefore, it's not a big hit to the ego. You know, dude, the world is round.
I think it was to that guy.
But I so wanted. Well, I don't know. I think Alfred
In
Wegener.
the church, at least.
I think Alfred Wegener, the guy that invented plate tectonics. I might have this wrong. It was an oceanography class I took that I forgot. But at some convention of oceanographers and geologists, you know, he had seafloor spreading and plate tectonics and how the continents were created.
Uh-huh.
It was a theory at this point. It was early 1900s. And he went to the convention, and nobody agreed with his theory. And as I recall, he wandered out into the Arctic, knowing that his story was rejected, and just like wandered off to certain and very cold death.
Or reptilian caves.
Or the reptilian caves. Yeah.
So I think that you just kind of
I just thought of
added
something.
another problem
Just
to
really quick, I'm sorry.
the conclusion.
Yeah, I have to say this or I'll forget.
Okay.
If we ever do meet the lizard people, and they exist, I can see a good ad by like Scope, because the military's, the people that are kind of flaking, the people that used to be in the military, you just have to assume when you watch these documentaries, they used to be coherent and rigorous, but now they just seem flaky. But they're always talking about how bad their breath work was. I can just see like a new ad by Scope or Crest. Do you know what I mean? And the lizard people say they're advanced. Not as advanced as Crest Scope. Like, so
Yeah.
you would still be selling shit, even though miraculous things would be happening about interstellar species connection. The machine of selling crap would still hum merrily along. Sorry for cutting you off.
I just wanted to wrap it up, Stefen, and kind of just I'm really impressed by the idea that yes, we have stories, yes, we have personal truths, but yeah, I mean, but a story is a personal belief, which is a truth to a person. I know you don't believe in personal truth. It can't be the truth.
Well, I think it's worth commenting on really quickly that when people use the phrase "my personal truth," these are just words, dude. Like, the important part of what anyone's saying is the idea.
Yeah,
And
probably it'd be better served if they said my personal belief.
I would say my personal belief. And like, one of the things that allows us to trust other people is that we have fundamental, basic, similar beliefs. So if everybody gets to decide what their own truth is, how am I supposed to navigate with somebody from a different country? How am I supposed to interact with a stranger?
Or anyone that doesn't have your truth.
Or anyway, yeah, they may be in my country with a different truth, or in a different country with the same truth. Like, that really limits connection and trust. And to me, it's all about goodwill. That's really all there is. If you don't have goodwill, you're fucked. It doesn't matter how logical or smart you are. If you don't have goodwill, you're fucked. We seem to talk about goodwill like it's just this additional quality that would be nice, all things being equal. But let's not get all soft and liberal, like, people aren't good. Dude, there is no system you can create of law or morality such that it can't be. People are pretty ingenious. If you have ill will, you'll find a way to make it seem like you're not violating any of the conventions and still get away with your ill will.
Yeah.
I would rather be on a desert island with 10 people who had goodwill and 105 IQ than 10 people who had ill will or not goodwill, and 170 IQ.
Yeah, obviously.
I don't know, not obviously. I could see someone answering, maybe not. Maybe maybe, because
105's good enough.
Okay, well, I mean, I think that's the average. I don't want to offend anybody unnecessarily.
Yeah.
But here's something I was just going to say to end it, or maybe not end it, but I just thought of this. The two things: what's happening in the world, and what am I going to do about it? What I'm going to do about it is kind of the domain of goodwill. What's happening in the world is kind of the domain of intelligence, right?
Yeah.
So in a weird way, what I'm saying with my desert island analogy is I think I would prefer the people I could trust with what they're going to do about something, even though they might get what's happening wrong sometimes. Does that make sense? If we have two hypothetical desert island populations,
Yeah, no, I get it.
the dummies with goodwill and the geniuses with ill will, it depends on how dumb and how bad-willed.
Yeah.
Because if they're like, IQ of a 4-year-old, it doesn't matter how much goodwill they have. They're gonna try to set to sea on a single coconut with a leaf paddling. I'm like, bro, that's not gonna float.
No. I don't know. I think it would be helpful if people could suspend their beliefs for however long possible to try to have a conversation with somebody that has a different point of view or a different story. And I feel like today, not many people are willing to do that. And so, like, if you don't believe what I believe, you're wrong. And I don't think we're going to get anywhere villainizing each other. And
Let me add an element here.
Yeah.
Let me introduce the concept of resentment really quickly, because yet another checkbox of things that make the resolution of conflict more difficult is resentment. I mean, we know from the program that resentment is the primary engine of all bullshit.
mm-hmm.
And literally translate, resentment is to re-feel. Like if I resent somebody, I feel all of these negative feelings as I just think about it. It's actually so it has a life story. So resentment stories are really sticky and really hard to get over.
Yeah.
Now, some resentment is legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not in any position to tell somebody they don't have the right to resent. I think to talk about the right to resent, or is it legitimate or not legitimate, nobody can say whether the idea of legitimacy is really squirrely and subjective. That's not a legitimate thought. Don't tell me how to feel. I get all that. But I'm just saying we might have a problem here because just in our country, the United States for the last 400 years has a pretty well-documented history of abuse, subjugation, disenfranchisement, and violence toward people based on a story that's based on a fallacy, which is that the color of your skin or whether you have a cock or a pussy affect your value and access to treatment that other people get. And so if you came from that group, if I were a black man or a black woman, and I can't even imagine what that would be like, but if I were, I might be so angry and resentful at what has happened to me and my people over this time. And that's me as a self identifying with a people, but it's so visible. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I might be so resentful and angry that it's not a proper solution. That I hear some people, dude, let's just go towards color blindness, and it should be no more important than brown or blue hair, like Sam Harris says. And then people that talk to him, they kind of accuse him of not being compassionate, whatever. Like, is it possible that that there are resentments that are so deep that it's not a likely strategy that would, hey, let's just start from square one, treating people right. And where we see injustice, let's try to address it. Does something need to occur such that that resentment is addressed? Because if I lived with a roommate for 20 years and they were just a piece of shit to me totally, never paid their share, blah, 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 and then out of nowhere they're like, okay, you know what, let's just start being equal and fair.
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay, fair enough, but you seem to be skating on that one.
Yeah.
And it gets more complicated because we're not talking about the roommate anymore. We're talking about a guy, like for instance me, who's poor and has no money and no actual material wealth. no power and no privilege by a certain perspective. But it could also be said I have privileges that I'm not aware of just because I've failed to use them. And then that gets into an issue. Okay, well, how many people are you going to tell that to? Like, oh, the reason you're not successful because you're a white male and had all these privilege, that's on you and your lack of character. But everybody else who's not successful, that's not white or male, most of their success can be attributed to a asymmetrical power exchange. That's not going to fly because nobody wants to hear that story about themselves.
Yeah.
So, like, it's a lot more complicated than the roommate because none of us were alive during slavery. So I don't know what to do about it, but I'm just asking the question. If it could be legitimate to be so resentful and angry about what has occurred that it's not good enough. That emotional attachment to your resentment is going to hold on to the story and make any resolution of conflict impossible unless it's just unilaterally decided. Like, no, you don't tell me how to do this. I'll tell you how this is going to go down. That's the only way I will feel finally not like violence has been perpetrated on me. I will write and then naturally, because people are selfish and ego-driven, they're going to be like, you don't get to write your whole script. You don't get to write the whole story. I'm a person too, so that's a problem.
You can write your script, but you can't write my script.
This is a really interesting point. Motivational speakers are always like, write your own story, write your life. It's your script. Write it how you want it.
Right.
But many of us want to then involve other actors. And we're like, okay, and I have a role for you also. You're going to be in my movie. And they're like, dude, I have my own movie. I don't want to be in your movie. Well, you need to be in my movie because I wasn't able to make movies for so long. And you've been making movies for 5,000 years. It's my turn to make movies. How's that? Everybody wants to make their movie. So if your movie requires other people to think a certain way, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
If your movie requires that you, as a character in your movie, act in accord with an idea of generosity of spirit and fairness and the golden rule, then you can act that out in your movie, and that will do some good. So if we're waiting until, I don't have an answer to it. I mean, the bottom line is, everything seems paradoxical to me.
Yeah, you're saying...
It's never been easier and it's never been tougher.
Yeah. You're saying that suspending your beliefs would be hard, given that people have emotional attachments to their stories. And I'm suggesting, yes, we have emotional attachments to our stories, but is there a way to tame that lion or whatever, the emotion, to say, okay, I feel these things, but this is in the interest of love, communication, understanding, and we're trying to come to an intellectual agreement more than...
Well, you tell me if that's possible. I think any statement that begins with, we use the word we all the time. I just did it there without even knowing. We use the word we. Like we talk about we. Do you think we're able to, which is kind of shorthand for them. Do you know what I mean? When we say we mean mainly them, even though I'm technically part of it, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about other people who are not sophisticated and stupid. Like, I don't know, can you do it? Like, I think the only hope any of us have is, like, if you can figure out a way to control your emotional connections to things, let us know how that goes and how to do it.
Yeah, I'm not very good at it, but I think...
But just saying words like love and understanding, see, I don't think love and understanding are solutions. I think that they can exist and we won't have certain issues. But I don't think love can ever be a solution to something.
I think it can.
Yeah, based on what?
I think love is the answer. Love and understanding.
Yeah, I mean, on one level, I agree.
And
I agree with you. I think it is the answer, but I'm saying something different. I'm using the
it's
word.
not a strategy.
Yeah, that's maybe more like what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not the answer. I want to say, like, it makes a lot of questions go away. Love doesn't answer the questions that are difficult to answer. love results in a situation such that those questions don't ever get asked in the first place. It's like attention. We were talking about attention at the beginning of this. What do you pay attention to? We live in a very weird world where, like, attention, I think the guy from Sapiens said this, is a resource. That's exactly, eyes on the screen everybody's vying for attention. Yeah. And if attention is the value, then what you do to get attention is of less interest. But what if what you do to get attention, because attention is the end value, results in a situation that's actually destructive and damaging? Well, we have this, we can just leave it with the concept of inadequate equilibria. We have systems in place that almost defy solution. Because we could all in a garage think, why don't I just wave a magic wand and do this? Of course. Yeah. But how do you actually manage to make that happen? Like, how can I manage,
solving the world problems?
Yeah. Let's just say that I can't pick up the telephone and call Bill Gates and be like, hey, I have a solution. Or if I notice something that's wrong with law enforcement, I can't walk into an office and be like, yeah, I have some ideas on law enforcement. That'd be ridiculous. Yeah. You know what I mean? So the inability of an actual good idea to find its way into a place in a system where that idea can then be turned into action may be more difficult than we think. Like, you're recording this because you just wanted to talk about what we were talking about today. It's not like we have a podcast. But I'm like, oh my God, this just seems like it'd be a cool podcast. I bet if I was hanging out with Russell Brand and he saw this, he'd be like, oh, that guy's clever, and he could drop me some help on how to develop a podcast, and through his power, that could happen for me. But I can't just send him a podcast. He gets 10,000 of them. So we just thought of that.
Yeah, you can.
Maybe you should watch the end of this first.
Yeah, we can do that.
All right. Anyway, that's cool. What else did you want? Do you want to play some music?
No.
Maybe we should get a chance to see how witty I am.
See how weak?
Witty.
Witty. No.
Maybe the same thing.
Yeah, I think we should say goodbye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks. We didn't solve anything.
Or did we?
All right. I'm interested in seeing what that looks like. Can you blow it up?